Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the American Society of Landscape Architects Emerging Professionals Committee Ask Me Anything event. How's that for a title? It's kind of long. We are so excited that you guys are here with us again today. Our special guest today is very exciting to us. We have Gina Ford with us. Gina is a principal and landscape architect in Sasaki's Urban Studio. Urban Studio is an energized and interdisciplinary group of practitioners solely dedicated to the improvement of quality of life in cities through vigorous planning, exceptional design, and strong community partnerships. Gina's work encompasses a wide range of scales and project types, from public parks and plazas to large-scale landscape planning and waterfront projects. She brings to each project a passion for the process of making vibrant landscape spaces, from the conceptual design to the details of implementation, with a particular focus on the life and use of urban public environments. Gina's experience is additionally informed by extensive research, writing, travel, teaching, and competitions. Her teaching includes guest critic and studio instructor roles at the Harvard Design School, MIT, and RISD. She holds degrees in architecture from Wellesley College and landscape architecture from the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Gina, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody.
I will let you, for 1 minute, say whatever you want as a kind of an open introductory. If you've got.
Okay. So I will just say that one of the great joys of my emerging middle age is the opportunity to get before students and young professionals and talk about the profession, because what we do is really extraordinary, and you have chosen a career path and a profession that is incredibly transformative to communities across the world, and I feel like I am an apostle for the discipline, and so any opportunity I can to speak with students and young professionals, I embrace wholeheartedly. So I'm really excited to hear what you're thinking about and give you my best advice, FWIW.
Awesome. That is fantastic. And love to hear when professionals are willing to give back to students and invest time and their resources into students and young professionals. That's very phenomenal. Thank you for that. So we are going to jump right into some questions. We're gonna really grill you today. So I hope you studied and you're prepared.
Oh, we're talking. Can I do it?
No, we just want to hear whatever. Feel free to take whatever tangents you want. Talk about whatever you want. We're here to learn from you today. So let's start off with just kind of a general question. How did you find landscape architecture? We talked in your bio that your undergrad was in architecture, and then you your master's in landscape architecture. How did you find landscape architecture, and what made that transition for you?
So I come from a family that's kind of half Italian American hard workers and half really ephemeral, crazy creatives. And so I always knew that I had this sort of balance of right and left brain, and got into thinking about architecture because it was readily available in the schools I went to. I saw it, I understood it, and wound up applying to schools of architecture and had the great blessing of going to Wellesley College, which is an all-women's college here in Massachusetts, and hopefully the home of our next president, not to be too political, or the school that our fearless leader potentially went to. There I studied architecture and art history and did a joint program with MIT and graduated with an architecture degree. Strangely, it was a time when a lot of firms weren't hiring, and I called one of my professors from MIT and I said, do you know anyone who's hiring around Boston? And he knew me, and he said, you should talk to Sasaki. They'd be great for you. And I actually wound up getting a job in the landscape discipline at Sasaki because in my undergraduate training I learned CAD. I self-taught myself CAD, and that was an incredibly valuable skill in the late 90s. And so I wound up actually falling into landscape architecture because I knew CAD and I was a drafter, and wound up in a really lucky stroke working with Stu Dawson, who was one of the founding partners of Sasaki and a great master landscape architect. And he really took me under his wing, and suddenly architecture seemed so much less interesting to think about this notion that, a landscape, it looks its worst on its first day and grows into being beautiful and robust, and architecture is the opposite. You put it in and it starts declining with time. And there was something about time and change that was really appealing to me. So I worked here for 3 years. I apprenticed and had the great fortune of going to the Harvard Design School to get my master's on the encouragement and support from the firm. And so, lucky break.
Wow. So literally just kind of fell into it by happenstance because that's the job that was available.
Because I knew how to do hatch patterns and paving in that CAD that the kids were using back in the late 90s. And so, sometimes you plan and sometimes you fall into good opportunities. So this was my good opportunity.
So thinking back to those days when you were falling into it, if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, one piece of advice that might make the path easier, what would that be?
Oh, I did this sort of 3 years of apprenticeship here that was very gritty. I was doing built work and CDs and CAD drafting, and then I went to GSD where suddenly the profession sort of opened up to me as this very serious, really big, set of challenges really around environmental change. I graduated and I came back to work at Sasaki, and I'm just recalling the advice of a sage that I think maybe you guys are talking to at one of your AMA events, Alexis Cantor with Scape. She was working with me here at Sasaki when we started the Chicago project. I was so stressed out that this project had to be magnificent. I was so stressed that I was so serious about it, and I just like the weight of the seriousness of the GSD felt like it was on my back. And Alexis said to me one day, Gina, this is landscape architecture. It's not brain surgery. And to me, it sounds silly and it was laughable at the time and it was funny, but it's so true. There's so much about what we do that's creative and fun. And I think the practice that I've been trying to cultivate is one where fun is part of the making, and it really helps to you can take serious things with stride and be joyful about your work. And I think that's the best advice I ever had. And now when I feel overwhelmed by a problem, I try to put myself in the user's position. I try to dream about what the most amazing experience could be and just really come at it from a positive side rather than stress. I know it can be stressful, especially when you're young and you're learning, but I think knowing also that it's joyful really helps me.
Right. Excellent. So you mentioned a friend giving you that advice. Who else or what perhaps has had the biggest impact on your career as an influence?
That's a good question. I would say first and foremost, like all the people do when they accept an Academy Award, I need to thank my mom. My mom is like this incredible force in my life, and she's the one that sort of encouraged me and pushed me to go to Wellesley, and I'm ever grateful for her for seeing that was the right thing for me, and has been, as I've had my daughter and tried to struggle with work-life balance, my mom has been this constant force. So that I have to say. And then Stu Dawson was a huge mentor to me. He's larger than life, always will be, and he's retired now, and I miss him every day here. But he's the voice in my head when I struggle with something. And then lastly, I think I had a whole slew of amazing women at GSD: Hope Hasbrook, Dorothy Amber, Sherry Fultonier, Elizabeth Massa, Polly Getch Clark, and I really learned the craft of landscape with those women, and I'm ever grateful to them. They've really helped to shape my understanding of landscape architecture as a profession and discipline.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I do want to say to those that are joining us, feel free to type your questions into the chat section, and we will get to them and ask Gina live so you can hear your answers. So remember that. All right. So now that you are a landscape architect and you've got all these influence, what's the best thing about being a landscape architect? What's your favorite aspect?
Oh, I'm lucky that I'm at Sasaki because we are really broad and diverse, and I think that what I talk about a lot when I talk about the profession, and what's so great about the profession, is all of the different scales that we can influence change. Lately, I've been giving a talk at universities that highlight 3 projects that I've completed in the last few years. One that was, 2 acres, one that was a whole urban district in Chicago, and then one that was, regional, national scale challenges of the Mississippi River Delta, and thinking about sort of large scale environmental change. And to me, I think the idea that landscape has really come into its own in the past decades really is this amazing tool for urban change, and that tool is efficient and effective at all of these different scales, from the scale of the human body and the experience of a small scale place all the way to, large scale environmental change and climate change and flood resilience and disaster resilience. To me is really, what other profession do you get to do everything from, the smallest of details to the largest of strategies? It's pretty exciting. Yeah. Keeps me interested too, that, it's constantly changing problem and boundary, and I love that.
If for some reason someone told you couldn't be a landscape architect anymore, what career would you like to try instead?
Oh my God, that's so easy. I would be a professional poker player. Yeah.
Oh, great answer. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I've been cultivating that as a side skill set in case this whole landscape architecture thing doesn't work out. I do. It's part of the love of solving problems. I love playing cards.
I play a lot of poker myself, so I totally.
Oh, Daniel, we must get together sometime in Vegas.
All right, yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I would love it. It's you use a lot of the same math skills. You learn to people and the stakeholders at the table, the CEO.
It's a community. It's a community. You're rooting. You're this bad guy. The dealer. There's a lot of math and chance and. It's the other thing I can sit down and do for long periods of time and never get bored.
Right. Yeah. Poker tournament in New Orleans at the annual meeting next week.
Oh, hey, friend, let's do it.
There's a casino right there, right downtown. That sounds great.
Yeah, I've been there.
All right. So, in your, you kind of look at this from two ways. One, you're a teacher, a professor, you're dealing with students, and two, at the firm. Do you think there are any skills or traits that every landscape architect should have when they come out of school, that's kind of given traits?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the generation of folks that are coming out of school now and the kinds of tools that they are being taught, which I think are incredibly valuable. The computer, that newfangled computer-aided design, computer renderings. I think all of that is pretty essential and basic. I think the thing that sort of has gotten lost for me and that I really cherish in new members of the team at Sasaki is the sense of the drawing as a conversation, that you bring to the table ideas, and sometimes in ugly form, sometimes in sketch form, sometimes you sketch at the table, and that is a process of really having a conversation and putting out ideas. And I think the computer sometimes really limits the self-expression and the sharing of ideas. I can't tell you the number of times someone says to me, oh yeah, I say, oh, did you try that? They say, yeah, I tried it, but it didn't work out, so I did this other thing. But they only come with that one thing, They don't come with all the failures. And I think that's to me, I think, a really essential skill is being able to actually participate in that conversation and bring yourself fully to that conversation and bring even your failure to the conversation. I like to say to teams sometimes, I'm totally comfortable with drawing ugly things in front of you, because that's, how else do you get to something beautiful unless you try a lot of ugly sketches. And so that to me is the thing that is so rare, to find someone who's willing to put their ideas on paper in front of you in real time. And I love that.
Excellent. We do have an audience question I'll jump to real quick. What is an unexpected challenge you faced when you entered the profession?
I don't want to jump to gender. We're 14 minutes in. Okay, I'll jump to gender. I think that I talk a lot also when I have a platform and an audience about diversity, all kinds of diversity, and I think that our profession right now is really starved for leadership that looks more diverse than it looks today. And I worked my way up here. I became one of the first women principals in the organization and in the landscape practice here in Watertown, the first one, and was very young at the time. I was 31. And my partners at the time were all men, and they were wonderful and they were well-intentioned, and they were really kind of scratching their heads about why they weren't able to get more women into positions sooner and more, non-white leaders. And that's been a really huge challenge for the profession. And I think, from that, I really have tried to be a champion for non-traditional voices and of women leaders in the organization. And it's a delicate balance. You don't want to make everything about gender or race all the time, but it certainly is a barrier to our profession innovating and being relevant. And so that's something that I've really worked hard here to overcome, to help others overcome, to sort of build more conversation around it and more action around it. And something that I really would love to see the profession do more and more readily. I think we need to be out talking to kids, like me, right? I never would have even known about landscape architecture except that, I fell into Sasaki, right? Like one of the best landscape companies in the world, by chance, right? But I didn't know what it was. I probably would have liked it, as a 16-year-old. Who knows? But I think we need to do more to get out there before people are making that decision to go to school.
Yep. And you actually kind of rolled right into one of my next questions. You being a faculty member and being in classes and seeing, and as part of what the Emerging Professionals Committee does, we're visiting a lot of schools around the country and going into landscape architecture programs. And you can see in the programs that diversity is on the rise. In fact, I was very pleased last week. I was in a studio at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and there were 34 students in the studio. And we're sitting there, I just kind of started counting. Only 4 white males out of 34.
Oh no, Daniel, where are people?
I know. So I think the trend is moving possibly in the right direction, but and you said we could do more. Any ideas specifically? What can we do more? What could the profession do?
Yes, lots. I mean, I think there's a very big difference between attracting people into the profession and then retaining them, and seeing them become the leaders of the profession. And that's, I think the women in landscape architecture has been on the rise for a very long time, and it's not bearing out yet at leadership levels in organizations and faculties and client teams across, starting to. But there's a lot more. I think, it's not, if it were just a matter of the numbers going through school and the numbers getting into the workforce and the numbers just eventually rising to the top, we would have seen that by now. And we don't. And so, and it's not, I think the easy fallback is that it's about, in the case of gender, kind of like women with kids or, family issues, but it's really not that. The thing that I really talk about, and, Diana Fernandez is here, we've talked about this a lot, is, I was able to get to where I am in my company because I was really actively sponsored. Someone took me under their wing and really busted open opportunity for me, even opportunity that I wasn't yet ready for and was really uncomfortable. But it was such a huge learning curve for me, and I think we need to be really proactive and strategic when we have folks of color and women and with LGBT members of our community to be proactive about giving them opportunity and getting them in right position and giving them the right kind of guidance and support to be successful. So to me, that's kind of what I focus on here at Sasaki.
Excellent.
And I know some of my white men are on too, and I adore them, and I equally for them. But I think too often that's where it's sort of lived, and it needs to live everywhere. Yeah.
Brilliant. Question from the audience: what advice would you give to a young woman beginning her career?
Oh, I guess I would give the same advice to a young woman I would give to anyone entering the profession: to be joyful, to be present, to be unafraid, to be yourself. I think so much of what I've been able to do here at Sasaki, I think about like the early days of my career when I like wore these ridiculous suits that kind of looked like men's suits, but maybe had a skirt because I thought like, oh, I'll blend. And it's taken me understanding that I'm actually a different person than that, and that I can express myself in my own way. And there was a seriousness about the company when I started, and I tried to live that seriousness, but I realized I'm kind of a goof, and that, clients kind of relate to me because I'm kind of a goof. So, be yourself as wholeheartedly as you can. Find a company and a mentor or sponsor that appreciates you for who you are and wants to nurture that part of you and not change you into something else. I like to tell students and young professionals, like, you are in charge of your destiny, and you can ask future employers or prospective employers for the things that you're going to need. And I would say ask for the things that you need, including active sponsorship. I don't want to just be sort of left off to the side to fight my way through something. I really need someone who's going to help me achieve at the highest level that I can. And I think, be yourself and ask for those things.
Great advice. All right. I don't want to beat the diversity thing to death,
Please.
but I want to
We're
go
all
and kind of go off that a little bit. This summer, you were one of the awesome people to be invited to give a declaration at the LAF Summit, the Landscape Architecture Foundation Summit in Philadelphia. And your talk, Into an Era of Landscape Humanism, talked a little bit about diversity, but then it went broader than that. You just talk about that a little bit and kind of summarize what your declaration was and where you see the next 50 years?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was such an amazing opportunity, and I'm so grateful to the LAF for having me. It was really intimidating for so many reasons. I mean, the company, the size of the audience, the fact that I had flown in from a red eye from Denver the night before and could hardly get words out, forget about like a whole 10-minute talk. Anyway, it was an amazing thing, and I'm really grateful that they did it. And, as I was saying, diversity is really important to me. Diana Fernandez, who works here, helped me put that talk together, and we brainstormed quite a bit about it. And, I think, to be totally honest, I'll tell you what I talked about. I talked about this idea of humanism and human-centered design, but also all of the soft skills that we use around communication and this notion of diversity and how that makes us more relatable to our peers. And to be totally honest, just with this small group that's watching, I just get a little tired of, we get so overwhelmed by environmental challenge, and there's this like reversion that we have, or this like insistence on drawing lots of ecological diagrams and thinking somehow that it's all about the science of the environment. And I just think that for places to be truly transformed, it has to also happen at a human level and at a there has to be social cultural understanding as well. So, I was sitting down to reflect on that, and I thought, this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the fact that fundamentally, even the environmental change we propose is about making places great for people and making people come into contact and steward nature and environmental systems more. But that, there was just a period where I felt like everything was about fetishizing ecology, and that's great. And, ecology has its place, but we also should be digging as deeply into the human needs. And I think sometimes, especially when you look at some of the challenges in our country right now around Black Lives Matter and underserved neighborhoods and populations, and we have a big role to play in that kind of transformational change. And so that's what I wanted to talk about.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for landscape architecture right now in the world?
I think it's back to this idea of kind of from all the way from the paving pattern to the, realignment of rivers and the rethinking of our coastal environments. I think, maybe every landscape architect has felt like they happen to be poised at this moment of the great moment of appreciation for what we do. But doesn't it feel like there's a great appreciation now for what we do, that you see articles in the New Yorker magazine about Governor's Island, and you see people talking about the Highline effect, and you see people talking about, sea level rise and climate resiliency. We've been talking about that for decades, and now people are like catching on. So I really think we're in this incredible moment where people are awakening to the challenges of the natural environment that we've largely made for ourselves, or at least, developed in its path. And that there's a huge opportunity there. And I think it's exciting that it's from, the small scale built piece all the way to, large scale systems, and potentially, rethinking the way communities interact with things like the ocean. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good time to be a landscape architect, for sure.
Great time. Back to the joy thing. Yeah.
So conversely, what do you think is the biggest threat to landscape architecture?
I think part of my talk at the LAF was about this idea of our soft skills, about communication and collaboration, and in a lot of ways that has to do with, a nervousness that our professional skill sets have the potential of getting sort of appropriated by other disciplines that aren't as good at what we do. So no offense to my engineering friends or my architectural friends, but there's a lot of territory creep there. The potential for engineers to do quote unquote what we do, or architects to do what we do. And bless their hearts, they have incredible skill sets that are really important and necessary too, but landscape architects are the ones that do landscape architecture best. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is being a vocal and strong presence at the table so that you are bringing those inputs together and into strong, solid, well-communicated ideas. Without landscape architects, I see competitions. I think the most famous of them is probably what's happening with the LA River and kind of Frank Gehry owning that after a lot of really beautiful work by Mia Lehrer. And I don't know it well enough to know what that looks like in reality. I do know, though, that you see sometimes that entanglement where architects think they know enough about it, or engineers, will insert themselves into places where the landscape architect can really make a much more meaningful.
Right. Okay. I'm going to throw an audience question. What is your favorite book related to landscape architecture?
Oh, my favorite book. I mean, I guess it would be kind of a cop-out to talk about Anne Spirn, but there's a book that, oh God, I'm forgetting the name of it. I don't think it's The Granite Garden, but it could be. Maybe it's The Language of Landscape. There's a bunch of books by Anne Spirn. I think she's one of the greatest thinkers in landscape architecture, and she very much, what I really appreciate about her is that her assessment of environmental challenge is very human-centered. You think about some of the work that she did in Philadelphia. She made this really profound observation that's so simple and so clear, that when you see really struggling neighborhoods and cities, oftentimes they live on top of buried water bodies, that they've been filled in, or that there's a drainage problem. And so they're the first ones to have impacts from storms, and there's all of this sort of like environmental degradation that comes along with living in a place where you really probably shouldn't live, whereas the wealthy live on the high and dry hillside. And making those kinds of connections between ecological systems and human natural cultural systems is, to me, really some of the most wonderful writing in our profession right now, or historically, I should say.
All right. And another audience question. Do you ever encounter difficulty working with an allied professional? If so, how do you address
it? Yeah, I mean, we all do. We all do. It's really tough. I think, we really work hard at Sasaki to try to figure out who our most collaborative, most wonderful partners are going to be. And part of that is really finding the best, the most wonderful clients that know kind of what we can do and really embrace what we do. And so, a lot of times the relationships that we have are ones that we've been strategic about, and so we don't have that much of an issue. But then sometimes you do get into entanglements, and you do get into challenges on projects, and it's always a little tough for us, I think, because we're so used to being the leading voice on a team. Sometimes it's really hard to share that, or to figure out a way to do it to bring those together in a really collaborative way. It's funny. I haven't talked much about this, but Sasaki, by its nature, is an interdisciplinary practice, right? So under the roof of the building I'm sitting in, there's architects, landscape architects, civil engineers, graphic designers, planners, urban designers, and so, I've purposely chosen to come back to this after school and to be here and to invest all of my energy in this practice, because I think that's really profound to have all these disciplines. And so it gives you a kind of training, too, about how to speak with other disciplines and how to negotiate conflict. And I think that's been really handy as you think about kind of like partners outside the firm. Sometimes, sometimes you just work with someone and their values are just completely misaligned with yours. And I think the best thing to do in that situation is to acknowledge it early on and either part ways or, walk away or change the team. Because, life is short. Life is short to be in a bad marriage. So.
Yes. All right. Another question from Hina in our audience. Who, according to you, or who, in your opinion, is a promising future landscape architect that brings the practice to another level? The young up-and-comers, besides Diana Fernandez, of course.
Or Hina Gajar. I mean, these are both stellar human beings, incredible landscape architects. Who do I think out there is doing really crazy, beautiful landscape architecture? I mean, it would be silly of me not to mention my friends at Scape. They are a relatively young practice and I think are really doing some incredibly creative, wonderful work. I think, let me think who else? Who else do I think is doing crazy, beautiful stuff? I think, not younger. I have this burgeoning love affair with David Rubin, who was your last speaker. I mean, right? Wasn't David like insanely inspiring?
Yes, very much.
I mean, love affair in like a professional, not romantic way, but he and I talk a lot about landscape, and it's always this. I just think his whole way of approaching kind of humanist principled design is really inspiring and wonderful. So, and he is cultivating a new practice, right? He's not a young startup, but he's growing a small practice. That's really exciting. It's really great to watch.
Yeah, he's great. I really enjoy talking with him.
Yeah, right.
Yep. All right, another audience question. What art form do you find inspiring, and who is your favorite artist?
Oh, okay. So my favorite artist is actually my sister. She is a chef and she cooks in California. She's not your typical chef. Like she is also an artist. She did printmaking. She did performance art for a long time, and she, in a really similar way to my fallen at Sasaki, fell in with a really amazing chef named Alice Waters at Chez Panisse in Berkeley. And it's all about sustainable food and reconnecting people to the goodness and simpleness of vegetables and sustainable food systems. And so she and I collaborate occasionally on some things, and she's just this constant bumping in of her world of food and food systems and mine and landscape. It's amazing all of these different ways like we keep coming together about it, and she's really inspiring to me. So my big sister.
Awesome. Food is art. I like that. Can't go wrong with food.
It's love too, my family's love.
So you kind of mentioned kind of the way food and landscape are intermingling and those paths kind of cross. And I've seen some of that. I was a juror on the Olmsted Scholar Graduate Award this year, and there was a lot of food-related essays. People were looking to do that kind of work. What other kind of emerging trends are you seeing coming out of schools with students? What are the emerging trends?
Yeah, what am I seeing coming out of students right now? I'm thinking about, Hina is doing, has been working on this incredible research project to think about asphalt and the deterioration of asphalt in new ways, like how to almost kind of like find natural processes that can help compost asphalt as a way of eliminating it from our environment or making it something more resilient. And, I think over the last decade at Sasaki, we've done a lot more investment in research. And research can be at the scale of kind of our fab lab and sort of fabrication techniques, or research into large-scale urban change, like our Sea Change project, which is a project we did to look at sea level rise in Boston. So this connection between, research as a way of advancing a set of ideas and then relating that very directly to practice is really exciting to me and something that I feel like is growing. And I think, we've embraced it, both because we know it can help us advance our work, but also we know that it can help us attract the best young talent because people want to come to a place where they feel like their research agenda will be embraced. And so, yeah, that's a really exciting trend that I think we've been happy to support and happy to continue to support here. Yeah.
All right. Here we go. What is your favorite place to escape on a stressful day? Which, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to show you. So we have the, like, can I do this? We have the great benefit of being right on the Charles River. You all see that? Those people out there enjoying the waterfall right now. And, we're really lucky that our office is in this place where we can step outside and walk along the river or run along the river, which I get to do sometimes, not as much as I'd like. But that's pretty wonderful. And, I'll be like really philosophical for a second. Like sometimes being on the river is such a powerful tool to escape stress because I look out at it sometimes and I think it's kind of my mantra of stress. I think this river has been flowing here long before I was here and it will flow long after I'm gone. And there's just something about that sense of time and scale that it brings that suddenly whatever I'm thinking about feels really like, oh, I can deal with that,
Yeah.
So, so
Problem.
that's kind of, we're really blessed to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a phenomenal office. I get to see a little bit as you.
Yeah, I'll just take you guys on a tour later if you want with my laptop.
Um, so we're talking about the office in Sasaki. What makes Sasaki special? What makes it stand out from other firms? What gives it its core?
What makes Sasaki special? So we're just about to do this incredible rebrand launch party, which is happening in about an hour and a half, I think. And it's been an effort that we've been undertook about a year ago, I guess, with Bruce Mao Design and with a huge group here at the office that helped think about it. And we've sort of asked that question of ourselves. Why are we here? What are we doing? What do we want to see ourselves do? And I think, at its core, I think Sasaki is special because of its interdisciplinariness, the fact that we feel like no way you can accomplish what needs to be accomplished in the world without different perspectives being at the table and really embracing multiplicity as voice as an important part of the practice. So I look at the clarity that comes of being in a single-headed firm, where the name over the door is the name of the owner, and I think, oh, that must be such an easy way to exist because where the buck stops. At Sasaki, it's very complicated and chaotic sometimes, but it's that special thing that happens when you get people with different ideas at the same table. And I think, so some firms will say, oh, well, we're an interdisciplinary firm because we have like a handful of planners in our architecture practice, or we have a handful of architects in our planning practice. But what's really special about Sasaki is that our main practice areas, architecture, interiors, landscape and civil engineering, and urban design planning, are intentionally kept the same size so that we never become a dominant disciplined firm. And that's kind of a really beautiful idea that everybody has equal weight at the table, right? So you never have a part of the office being subservient or secondary to another. And to me, that's like a profound practice model and something that I really feel excited about every day here.
And how do you manage to stay relevant as a firm over the course of pretty long tenure as a firm? What's going on internally that makes it keep up with the times and stay on top?
Yeah, I think Sasaki has a really good track record of successional leadership change. So we had Hideo Sasaki, and then he had a sort of a small, tight-knit partnership that followed on him, and then that group had successors, or were successors to another whole, or had successors to another whole round. And so Sasaki's been through the successional change model a few times, and so it's kind of it's funny for like an architecture firm, right? It's like archaeologically old compared to most firms we talk about and compete against. And some of them are challenged by this idea of like change over time. And that's something I think actually we do pretty well. Um, so I think one thing that's been really great in recent years has been that and I don't mean this as in any way an offense to the boomer generation, who I adore and who taught me everything I know about the profession, and the silent generation too. But we've seen a lot of retirement of that level, that seniority, and we've had a much younger group of leaders sort of take the helm here. Our executive leadership team is between 40 and 50 years old, and so it's a much younger group, and there's a lot of energy in that change. That's been really stressful at times, like having your whole world sometimes feel like it's upside down, but ultimately it feels really energized and really exciting. And then I think that the other really important thing is that in the past decade, we've really been super intentional about how we hire and who we bring into the office. We used to have this principle that the right resumes will kind of come in the door. And for us now, that's not necessarily how we hire. We hire based on relationship, on who we know, on recommendations from people we know and trust, from members of our team that have friends that they want to bring in. And and once people are here, we really try our best. We don't always succeed, but we try our best to create ways for them to get engaged, either in initiatives, thinking about like Matthew Mketo, who's here, who has been planting a pollinator garden in our back parking lot, along with our garden and our chicken coops and our vegetables. Or the research initiatives that we have. We just did a big one on play. So we really try to let our team's passion sort of drive us into new places, and that's kind of helps keep us relevant, I think.
So it sounds like with Secession and some of the things you mentioned, very strong mentor relationships within the firm. Mm-hmm. Do you currently have a mentor still at this point?
I do. I mean, it's funny, I'm at a place now, I was part of the executive leadership team here for a while, and so they're more my peers than my mentors, but I see them as my counsel. I feel like I can text or call them and just ask them questions about anything. So I have a very strong mentor in Mark Dawson, who's the head of our site practice here, and he's been really wonderful. But then I hit a point in my career, and I think this is a kind of a wise thing. I have a kind of counsel outside the office that I rely on quite a bit. And I won't name any names, but it's this big network of practitioners and academics that, are just, there's a mutual admiration and kind of fan club quality. Like we sort of network that we meet up at ASLA as like a group, and they're really they've been a really good sounding board for me as I've encountered challenges or as I see opportunities to be able to talk. And I think that's something to really cultivate. Sometimes we can get really, focused on our practice to the point where we no longer have a sense of connection with the outside world. And so my counsel helps me have, sort of objective voices that I can bounce ideas off of.
Right. And then I know that you have people that you are currently mentoring as well. Is that multiple people that are younger in the firm that you're then guiding to pass?
Yeah. I mean, there's it's amazing to me how much I wish I could do more than I do. I think there's such incredible talent at Sasaki, and I only at any given time get to work with, whatever number of projects I have, that's the number of people that I get to interact with on a daily basis. And, it makes me sad sometimes that I don't get to be with everyone all the time. But that said, yeah, I mean, I think that I hope they feel like I mentor them. I do my best. It gets really challenging as life creeps up on you, and I have a daughter who's 9, and she needs some mentoring too. And I have clients all over the country, and I'm on the road a lot, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do do good by everybody, and to make sure that everybody's getting some attention. And yeah, it's tough though. I'm doing what I can, but I wish I could do more.
You mentioned that, however many projects you're working on, that's how many people you're dealing with. On average, how many projects are you working on at one time?
Good question. So I'm working on right now probably between 10 and 15 projects. And that sounds really crazy when I say it out loud. And it's also really crazy when you think about the range of projects. We're doing everything from the city of Denver's overall citywide parks and recreation plan, looking at their whole, tens of thousands of acres of open space, including mountain parks, all the way down to Moore Square in Raleigh, which is a 4-acre downtown square that's going to go into construction shortly. And right now, my projects are like as geographically diverse in this country as you could. It's like Boston, upstate New York, Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, a big waterfront project, Alabama, Raleigh, North Carolina. It's So when I say that I wish I had more time for mentoring, it's because I'm like a ping pong ball around the country most weeks.
The audience is wondering if you get any sleep.
I do. Oh, that's a great, sleep. Sleep and joy. There's a strong connection between sleep and joy. Some nights I go like 6 hours and that's not enough for me. Most nights I try to get 9 or 10 hours of sleep, to be honest, I do. Yeah, I've just had to figure out like how to be strategic about every single minute I'm awake. I was in the shower the other day. This is probably too much information for an AMA, and Ask Me Anything. But I'll just say I was in the shower the other day and I just thought, I'm just going to take 30 seconds to not think about anything except, look outside and look at the sky. And that felt like such a luxury, like 30 seconds to myself. So, but I do sleep. I think sleep is one of those things that you just got to do. I mean, otherwise I'm just useless anyway.
All right. Another audience question. Have you ever gone to visit a built project from early in your career? Did the design succeed as you intended?
I mean, yeah, I've been to things that were built. The first projects that I did at Sasaki were Indianapolis Riverfront with Stu, and Detroit Riverfront, and Columbus, Ohio Riverfront project there. And then I spent a lot of time with this project called National Harbor in DC. And I think all of them, I'm really proud of the craft of them. I think one thing Sasaki really knows how to do is how to make something lasting, and so and how to do things like the basics of grading and planting really well. So you go and you feel that. I mean, you feel that it's well considered and well crafted. I think the challenge that we have as landscape architects, when I go back and see projects of mine, and I'm channeling Charles Birnbaum here, whose board I'm on, and we talk about this a lot. The project, as you hand it over, has this whole other life. The rest of its life is in somebody else's hands. And when I go back to projects and I see like plastic flower pots or plastic flower pots are like the bane of my existence. And they're on every project winds up getting like a terracotta plastic flower annual display, and it just kills you. And so one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is how do you make something in the world that somebody else that's going to own it understands and feels as committed to as you do. And you really can believe that they're going to then transition that over many decades, right? It's like pretty profound. Stu did the John Deere headquarters in, I think, Moline, Illinois, and he went back every year, every couple of years to look at the tree planting. He helped them prune things. He helped them when change was needed. And it was really a 30 to 40-year relationship that they had over this landscape. And when you go there, it shows. There is not a plastic flower pot as far as the eye can see. And I think, that cultivating those kinds of relationships with your client where when something comes up, they go, we better talk to Gina about that. We better get Sasaki here thinking about, well, how do we adapt this, That's kind of where I'm trying to position my work with my clients, as this real partnership, so that they won't befuddle it with
No plastic flowers. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite project that you ever worked on? What would you call the top, or at least was the most fun to work on? And those might be two different things: your favorite one to work on and your favorite finish.
Yeah, I mean, right now where I am in my life, the Chicago Riverwalk is clearly the thing that I feel the proudest of, and huge team, like so many amazing contributors, both from a sub-consultant side to a client side that worked to make that project successful. But it's front of mind because phase three, the next 3 blocks of the project are opening next Saturday. So it's kind of all we're doing right now is looking on social media and having Steve Walls, who's out there right now, texting us photos of what it looks like. That project so rich in just everything from its existing site as just like this insanely beautiful, crazy scaled urban canyon of space on the main branch of the river to what the client enabled us to do with material quality. Working for the Chicago Department of Transportation was a gift because they know their stuff when it comes to construction and they don't let anything slide and they have rigorous processes during construction that were really valuable. To just the open stretches right now and watching people. I was there one day and just drinking a glass of seltzer water out on the wine terrace and everybody, there was like hundreds of people in this landscape and they were like so happy and they were, there's boats pulling up and there were people walking by and I was with my mom, I took my mom and my mom was like, just got this sort of like look in her eye, she was like, oh my God. And I'm like, I know, right? Like, this wasn't here and now it is and like we're standing in it and it's just that project is really magic and it's unfolding magic, which is really great. The other one that's been really fun is the Lawn on D here in Boston, which is this little temporary landscape that we did in a few months time, and that continues to be my daughter's favorite project because she can go and ride on her scooter and play on the light up swings and there's things about that have been really fun too. So anyway.
All
My
right.
heart belongs to you right now.
Those were the good moments. What's the worst day you've ever had on the job?
Oh, the worst day. Do I have a worst day? I mean, I think the worst day, I had one of these recently actually, and it's rare, but when it happens, it's so bad. When a client doesn't like your design work, oh God, there's like nothing worse. Like you go and you got your drawings and you got your ideas and you can see it in your head and you're like, oh my God, isn't this the coolest? And they're looking at you like, what? I don't get it, and you're like, how do I explain this? How do I show this to them? And sometimes you just miss the mark, and it's, I feel, I have a couple days after when that happens where I just like I just can't even. I'm like, I'm gonna go play poker. But then you have to kind of pick yourself up and like hear what they said and understand what they said and then try to, paint a picture that is receptive or that's well received, that is acknowledges their comments and stuff. But yeah, to me that's still, it's just just the worst. And I had it happen recently and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with myself? But, life goes on.
Yep. After you compromise and then you get the final result, how do you feel about that final result? Are you usually happy?
It's really funny too. I think there's this funny thing about the pictures we paint in our heads of the work that we do. So many times now we go to job interviews in cities where we're trying to get work and we go with ideas because we kind of treat an interview like it's the first workshop of a project, and you come and you bring kind of thoughts about what you see and what it could be. And it's funny because those projects that even the ones that you don't get, that somebody else gets and makes into something, I go to them and I still see the thing that I was thinking about, It's like somehow that's still this this picture in your head, And so I bring that up in response to your question about how do you feel about the design when it changes. The same thing happens on every project that you go through 10 ideas and you always kind of wonder what the other ideas would have looked like and would they have performed better, and you just can never know those things. It's just funny because we deal with imagining a future reality, sometimes those realities actually kind of stick with you even though they don't get realized.
Describe your creative process. How do you mentioned earlier you like to sketch, ugly sketch.
Yeah, sketching, a lot of ugly sketching, a lot of sketching in PowerPoint. My teams would tell you, which nobody understands but me. I just airplanes and PowerPoint. It's my jam. Um, I I like thinking about design as the intersection of observation of a place, deep observation of a place, if you can, kind of getting to know the people, getting to know their needs, getting to know the physical context, with kind of client aspiration, understanding what the client's about, what they're willing to do, what they're willing to maintain, what they're willing to program, so that you create something that really meets those needs. I think, honing listening skills, being able to truly understand what people are after and give them what they need. Sometimes what they need is a little different than what they say they need, but understanding them enough to be able to show them that. Yeah, that's, and then, I think like more tangibly, we work through things by sketching and by drawing. I'll come back to that point just because, you young professionals, the more you can loosen up and let go and draw and put out ugly ideas and sketch and be loose about it, the better. I think, Stu once asked me to do a sketch for the Detroit riverfront, this little kind of corner of it when I was, 22 years old and new to the office, didn't really know landscape architecture. If I saw those sketches today, I probably would die. But I brought him 2 sketches, and he turned and he looked at a wall, like kind of like the size of this wall back here, and he said, "I want you to fill the wall with ideas." And I did over the course of like 2 days. I just drew these like 11 by 17 sketches, and I just filled this entire wall. And ultimately, like I think he drew something, and we, tried to pretend like it was my idea, and that was what was done. But everybody that came through the office, he would bring them in, and he would show them. He'd say, "Do you see this? This is so good. You see all the drawings Gina made? She filled up the wall like I told her to do with ideas." And so, that's my training. And so now when I work with teams and they come with the one idea or like the one printout, this kind of like moment in time, I'm always longing for the wall of options. I'm always longing for the ugly failures as much as I want to see the glowing successes, So, and that's kind of how I've been taught the creative process is, breaking a lot of eggs or whatever.
Brings me to a next question on my list, actually. How do you evaluate success? When do you feel like you have succeeded? And even, as your career progresses and you're passing on to the next generation, what will make you feel like you succeeded?
Yeah, I think I've been working with some folks here at the office long enough now that they tell me things about, that my voice is in their head. And that's how I think about Stu. That's how I think about him. I think like even though he's not here, he's like, we're having this conversation every time I'm sketching. I'm like, what do you think, Stu? Is this right? And to me, if I can take the voice of Stu in my head and then like get it in my voice into someone else's head, it's perpetuating a legacy that is part of the founding of this firm, which I'm sure in Stu's head is Hideo. I'm sure it's like this nagging back of head perfectionist thing going on. But I think on the human side, that would make me really happy to know that I tell people all the time, like, oh, I wish you could see what it was like to work with Stu and the kinds of ways like you had to understand his process and the kinds of ways he was so respectful and such a good listener to his clients and really saw them as the most important priority and through that was able to do really amazing work. And so if I can be a voice of that legacy and instill that kind of quality and sense of partnership in the team here, I think I will have done a really great thing for the firm and for myself and for them. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, believe it or not, we have 1 minute left. Time
good.
has flown. So at this point, I guess I will let you offer any closing remarks that you might have, if you've got anything like to, and, incredible words of wisdom, poker advice, whatever that you would
Yeah.
like to pass.
Um, I would just like to thank you so much for having me and for listening to me talk about my path. I think this is a really extraordinary thing, Daniel, that you and your team are doing, and I'm really proud to be part of it. And I've been watching a few of the tapes or the videos online, and it's really what you're doing is not just a service to yourself, but you're really doing a service to the profession. I think the profession needs more visibility, and I think the idea of capturing some practitioners talking about how and why they do what they do is really special and really should be commended. So you guys should submit this for like an ASLA Communications Award or something, because it's really hot. It's really it's really amazing. So thank you.
Good.
So I guess the big takeaways for me of today: be joyful, be yourself, find good mentors, and be good mentors, and all else will fall in place.
That is great advice. Thank you so very much, Gina, for joining us. It was very great, and I this will go online on YouTube, so more people will be able to watch it. And so, all of those watching, be sure to spread the word, tell your friends, join us for future editions with more amazing landscape architects, and let's keep spreading the word, grow the profession. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye bye.
Bye.